Today, you're getting a real bargain. 2 kaiju bios for the price of 1. We're going to be covering the complete history of Wargilgar and Spyler, a pair of kaiju, well, they're technically kyoju, that Godzilla fought on screen in an official canonical Toho production that I never see Tokusatsu fans discuss. They come from Zone Fighter, which, just to make sure we're all up to speed, was a 1973 show that Toho put out in between Godzilla vs. Megalon and Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, that occasionally featured Godzilla or other famous Toho kaiju, in addition to a bunch of brand new beasts. Wargilgar and Spyler come from the first episode in the show to feature Godzilla, so they should be pretty memorable, but for some reason this doesn't really seem to be the case. Maybe this in-depth video will help. Let's get started by covering their behind-the-scenes creation. Ishiro Honda, the famous director behind a bunch of the early Toho kaiju films, including 8 Godzilla ones, was the director of Wargilgar and Spyler's episode, and apparently he told Koichi Kawakita, the special effects director for the same episode, to quote, "do whatever you want." And so, as a courtesy to the legendary director, Kawakita spent a ton of money on effects for this episode, and the special effects budget for episode 4 ended up ballooning way beyond what supervisor Tomoyuki Tanaka wanted, and Kawakita got scolded. I'm curious if this heavy amount of spending is why 2 monsters appeared in this episode in addition to Godzilla. Maybe it would have just been Wargilgar otherwise. Just speculation though. Shozo Yuhara wrote the screenplay, so I'll credit him with the creation of the 2 monsters, even though I don't know he actually did create them. We have both of their concept art, and the Wargilgar one seems to have a signature, but I can't read what it says, so I'm not sure who drew these up. I do know these 3 were the art directors though, so it could have been one of them. Spyler bears a striking resemblance to a certain Ultraman series monster, namely the Choju Vakashin from Ultraman Ace, and what's really crazy about this is that Vakashin made his debut exactly 1 year and 2 days before Spyler. Not only did Spyler appear on screen not long after Vakashin did, he debuted almost exactly on Vakashin's first anniversary, just being off by 2 days. We already know that when Zone Fighter was designed, the artist was told to, quote, come up with something similar to Ultraman, and thus I don't think it's a stretch at all to say Spyler is a rip-off Vakashin. But there are also areas on the monster's body that remind me of a different Ace monster, the first one, Baragon. Did they literally just combine those 2 Ultraman Choju to make Spyler? Basically, the only way Spyler looks different than them is that he only has 1 arm. No, wait. No, hold on. No, he doesn't. He has 2 arms. Why in this art does he only have 1? I guess it just doesn't show his second arm so you can see something behind it. Wargilgar looks kind of like an Ultraman Ace monster too, namely Aribunta, and his stomach looks a bit like that of Gigan. Speaking of Ultraman Ace, a company of Keizo Murase's, I believe called Suni, who apparently created these 3 suits for Ultraman Ace, would you look at that, Veracron and Vakashin are 2 of them. Coincidence? Made the Wargilgar suit. This was the only costume in the whole show made by this team though, I believe. The rest, including I presume Spyler, were apparently handled by Kan Komura, one of the art directors of Toho Visual Arts. Hello, I'm editing this video, and while putting it together I found extra info relevant to this video in this book. It seems to say Nobuyuki Yasumaru's team created the costumes of most of the terror beasts, so maybe not Kan Komura, and states that Akihiko Iguchi mainly created Wargilgar and Spyler. Just wanted to throw that in. I found this image which shows us exactly how tall Wargilgar's suit was compared to a human being, which is really cool. Isao Zushi is listed as the man who played the terror beasts in Zone Fighter, so he likely played at least one of these 2 monsters, and possibly both of them for different scenes. But I'm really not sure who played the villainous monster whose suit he wasn't in when Zone Fighter, Godzilla, Wargilgar, and Spyler were all on the screen at once. It's a mystery. That's basically the extent of the behind-the-scenes info we have on these 2. No info about why they were given their names or how their roars were made. But that's fine because we've still got a lot of in-universe history to discuss. Let's do it. The first of these 2 kaiju to appear in episode 4 of Zone Fighter was Wargilgar. Well, sort of. I'll explain later. Hotaru, aka Zone Angel, spotted the terror beast missile Wargilgar was inside of plummeting toward Earth one night. But when the Zone family went to investigate the area where it looked to have landed, the missile wasn't there. But this guy was. He looked just like an old friend of Hotaru's from the Zone family's former home of Peaceland, but he was behaving very suspiciously. Later, right after Hikaru, the human form of Zone Fighter, and Hotaru dropped this guy off at his house, the Terror Beast missile suddenly appeared not far from where they were, from under the ground, and exploded, and Wargilgar emerged, ready to do the bidding of the evil Garogas. It started stomping toward the Zone family's car, and in an attempt to get away from the beast, Hikaru began turning the steering wheel like crazy while the car continued going forward in a remarkably straight line. Something exploded, and I can't tell if the car was totaled or if Hikaru just decided he couldn't go any further. Either way, he abandoned the car and called out Zone Double Fight to transform into Zone Fighter and fight Wargilgar. He kicked the creature over to start the match, and then had to jump to the side to dodge the creature's very powerful-looking fire breath. He then created a meteor zone barrier to protect himself from the flames, ripping off one of Ultraman's moves. The hero started grappling with Wargilgar and was able to toss him to the ground. The Kaiju, whose attacks just weren't connecting, decided to try a new technique. Two cannon-like objects suddenly popped out from between the creature's mandibles, and he used them to fire explosives of some sort at Zone Fighter. But the hero used this old trick to dodge all the shots, though he looked noticeably shook up afterward despite not having been hit directly. But rather than beat him up while he could, Wargilgar then briefly fired in Hotaru's direction, and her friend appeared to help her get away from the flames. Zone Fighter pulled himself together and kicked the beast and knocked it on the ground again, and then hit it with his Meteor Missile Might move, firing tons of missiles at the monster and pushing it back. At this point in the battle, Hotaru's friend held out his hand and a gun of some sort appeared, and he fired it at Wargilgar from behind Zone Fighter, surprising the giant hero because he was about to beat the beast. After getting hit by this gun, Wargilgar suddenly disappeared, but it wasn't actually dead. Because it turns out Hotaru's friend was actually a Garuga in disguise, who was secretly controlling Wargilgar and had infiltrated the Zone family home to plant a bunch of deadly toys to injure the heroes. He only caused Wargilgar to disappear to earn some trust. Later on, after Hikaru's shoulder was injured by the pernicious playthings, he revealed he was evil over a TV screen and unleashed Wargilgar again, this time in a heavily populated area. It began burning tons of structures and cars with its fire breath and smashing buildings by whacking them. The military arrived to combat the monster and were able to temporarily get his shoulder to catch on fire, as you can see here in their first strike. Eventually, they even got the monster to fall over, twice in fact. But the long-necked beast ended up bouncing back and finished all the tanks and jets in the area with his fire breath and mandible cannons, and was able to go back to his destructive ways. So, Hikaru became the non-Zone Double Fight version of Zone Fighter and headed off to battle Wargilgar. By flying into the TV? Guess that's one way to use your screen time. He whacked the monster a few times, but then got knocked over, and then Wargilgar started attacking his right shoulder, which had been injured by the toys. Then, the Kaiju flipped Zone Fighter over, and the hero looked to be in great pain. Meanwhile, way down on the ground, Zone Angel and Zone Junior were battling the Garuga that was running everything. And after he got sort of beat up, the Seijin decided to play his trump card, and he suddenly transformed into a second Kaiju, Spyler. This is why I said earlier that Wargilgar was only sort of the first Kaiju to appear in the episode. The being that could become Spyler appeared before him. Spyler headed over to battle Zone Fighter alongside his henchman monster, who was getting beat up badly again. Spyler whacked Zone Fighter away from Wargilgar, and suddenly the momentum shifted as it was now a 2-on-1. The two monsters took turns knocking the hero back and forth and then threw him on the ground, and once again he looked to be in pain. At that moment, though, the Zone family decided to try and even the playing field again by calling for the help of, as they called him, a monster of justice. Man, times had changed. Namely, the one and only Godzilla, who arrived to join the fray incredibly quickly. But not before Spyler could attack Zone Fighter several times with these flashes of light called killer laser beams, which caused the hero to yell in pain. As Godzilla entered the arena, Wargilgar and Spyler were beating Zone Fighter up by kicking him. Godzilla got both of their attention, and Wargilgar charged at the king of the monsters, and was promptly rammed to the ground. And it didn't go any better for Spyler, who got chucked down. Then Godzilla ripped the transformed Garuga's crescent-shaped tail off. Man, you're on fire today, Godzilla. Wargilgar tried to get Godzilla to stop attacking Spyler, but Godzilla easily knocked the monster away. By this time, Zone Fighter was ready to get back into the fight. He decided to attack Spyler while Godzilla handled Wargilgar. No, Godzilla, don't throw him over there. You'll mess things up for your ally. Oh, wait, why is this next shot disconnected? Oh well, guess you're in the clear, Godzilla. After Wargilgar got tossed on the ground by Godzilla again, he decided it was time to bring back his fire breath attack, and the king of the monsters had to step backwards quickly and seemed to take some damage from the flames. See, I told you that you were on fire today, Godzilla. But of course, Godzilla had an even better breath attack, his famous atomic breath, which for some reason just looked like smoke here. Feeling a little retro today, Godzilla? Wargilgar got a taste of his own medicine and went up in flames as Godzilla roared victoriously. Zone Fighter, meanwhile, flipped Spyler over his back and then prepared to use his Meteor Missile Might attack again. Spyler collapsed after getting hit by the blasts, but Zone Fighter, I guess, wasn't satisfied he was defeated. He picked up the creature and threw it in the air, and then blew it up with his proton beam. There, I think you got him, Zone Fighter. Spyler got a few more seconds of screen time in episode 12, in this sequence in which the narrator recapped the series so far, saying Zone Fighter had destroyed all the monsters he'd faced. It seems new footage was shot in front of a pink background. And Spyler is also present in the intro for the series, right here. And I think that's all the times these two kaiju appeared. They are both easy selections for my Forgotten Monsters Hall of Fame. It's crazy to me that these official opponents of Godzilla aren't talked about more often. Official merchandise of these two monsters does in fact exist, it's just very rare. There's a Spyler eraser and an incorrectly colored figure of the creature by Marmot. Marmot also put out a Wargilgar toy, and there's an eraser of him too. I also found this 2-inch figure of the Beast on eBay. And that's it for merch of these guys, as far as I know. I'd love it if the Movie Monster series or some other Godzilla figure line would tackle the Zone Fighter monsters someday. Hopefully if they do, they won't skip these two chaps. Speaking of figures, if you'd like to support the channel, be sure to check out the many Toku toys I've got for sale on my eBay store. Purchases help me out a lot. Or if you want to support the channel for free, be sure to watch my many other kaiju bios and other videos. And like and subscribe. Even leaving comments is helpful. And that's everything for today. My next class will be a power ranking of all the original 1966 Ultra Kaiju, so keep an eye out for that video. And thanks so much for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks, but you really ought to attend in person sometime. I want to meet all of you.
Hate to break it to you, Kashimu-kun, but that just isn't possible.
Sure it is. They just need to take a book out of Zone Fighter's page and fly through their screens to join us right now. Go!
Kashimu-kun, I know that sounds easy to you, and you being the OP little kaiju you are could probably manage it, but there's just no way...
Ah! Look, someone got through already somehow. But that looked painful. I don't want to get clobbered like that. Okay, never mind, guys. Stay with